Welcome back, I'm E.G. and this is episode 3 of the Conlang 101 series. Now we're going to be talking about Lexicon today, which is always fun. This is the words of a language, and it means you get to make stuff up and see the actual results. It's very exciting. Be aware, lexicon is often very much intertwined with syntax and the grammar of a language, so this video is going to touch on a couple of things, but not much, so you might feel like some of this information is incomplete. Oh no! And you'd be right. I'm only going to talk about the things that you can do without worrying too much about syntax and grammar, because that is next week's video. And it's very complicated. That one will be quite long. Anyways, so let's get started with the words of a language. Yeah. Anyways, I'm not a nerd at all. Okay, so you have a few things to consider when you are creating the vocabulary for your language. First things first, you have to understand that there are different classes of words. You've got nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, you've got articles, you've got pronouns. I mean, there's all sorts of different kinds of words, and they serve different purposes. You might be saying, well, duh, and yes, that is accurate. If you speak a language, you are aware of these things. However, there are people out there who have a hard time identifying these words, so we're going to be just covering everything. So these words have different forms a lot of the time in English. A verb comes in different forms. The infinitive, which is the to form, to dance, to sing, that is the base form. That's a different form than what you get if you are doing present tense with a copula. She is singing, she is dancing. I mean, you can go through and have different forms for all of these. Adverbs, oftentimes, but not always, end in ly and modify a verb. Adjectives can be all sorts of different endings. Beautiful, pretty, dark. I mean, they modify nouns most of the time, and it's they don't really have set forms in English. In other languages they do, so you just have to be aware of these things. Now, when you're considering some of the different classes of words and the categories of words, be aware that some things like nouns and adjectives and verb endings will depend on things like syntax, what case they are, whether or not they're the object of the sentence or the subject of a sentence, or if you're modifying a female noun versus a male noun versus a neutral noun. I mean, it depends on what you want, and again, that is something that you should have to consider with syntax. Consider some of it now, but for now, also note that we are going to be dealing mostly in the nominative case, which is the base form, or the subject case. You know, where she dances is the subject and she is the base form, and that's all we need to worry about for now. Keep those things in mind, though. You may want to acknowledge such things as gender and number. Right now, you don't need to worry about cases, and don't worry too much about gender and number unless, you know, it's a significant part of your language, like you have a different gender for different nouns, or if you have a different gender for the pronoun we, if you're talking about only males or only females, or a mixed group, or if you want to take into consideration other third genders or whatnot. So be aware of those things when you're going through and making up your vocabulary. So for making words, go through and come up with a list of what words you actually need for your language, because if you're going through and describing the various different trees and things that live in a swamp, and, you know, insects and beautiful rain sounds, and then you're writing a book about the desert, they don't actually align, and you don't need to worry about that as much. You know, if you need to do things like talking about let's go with Klingon again, because I'm still learning Klingon and it's still great fun. Things like fighting and honor and hatred and admiration. Those are important. Things like flowers and pillowcases, less important. So make a list of things that you actually need and start making words with that list. And this is where the part comes in from last week's video talking about the sounds. You have your list of sounds that you can use in your language, and hopefully you have things patterned out that work very well in your language, things that don't work well in your language. Go through and honestly pick sounds that you want to have for various words. It's really fun. So one more thing to consider when we're talking about the forms of words is morphemes versus full words. A morpheme is sort of the smallest base word that you have in a language. For example, cat. You cannot reduce cat down any smaller or you're going to get individual sounds, and that's not really helpful. Cat can be expanded into cats with a plural. You have that as a suffix, or catty, which is another suffix, creating instead an adjective. So you can expand cats outward. You can't decline it inwards. So you want to create the small forms before you go and create the big forms. For me, I have a generalized plural, or I have individual sounds that act as prefixes for prepositions and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're aware of the smallest part of the word, the smallest form of the word, before you go and expand that outwards. And again, some of that is going to do with syntax, and some of that is going to do with pure vocabulary. So it just depends on how you want to do that. Now, let's go through a little bit, and I'll go through and show you some Eloaech words. Some of these are relevant to things like speaker of words. Some of them are not, and they are in here. This is my world notebook, my grimoire for Teloria, which is the universe in which most of my stories take place. Well, all of the ones that don't actually occur in this reality. Anyways, so these are my notes over many years, and some of the language notes are not as relevant. Like, an original form of Eloaech had, I cannot tell you how many pronouns. It was ridiculous. I had different genders for everything. I had a thought that I would do such things as if it was a tangible versus intangible, and you know what? That was cool, and it is totally doable, but it was a mess to deal with. So I didn't do that. Instead, I stuck with standard pronoun collections. Okay, so some of the words I have that are, fairly significant to my world are things like ryun, which has the glottal stop in there in the middle, which is war. You've got reyun, which is, things like a plague or a mass disease, or any instance in which a large group of people died from circumstances other than immediate threat from other people. And yes, I do go that detailed in some of my definitions because it matters sometimes. There are lots of different words out there, like in English, that mean very similar things, but they're not exactly the same. So I have also things like that. I also went in here, talked about another language that is in the same world, Myosian, and how they're related, which was completely unnecessary. Anyways, let's find my more modern notes. I have verb conjugations. So one of the key phrases in speaker words is Neurun Taichanen, and then also Eloaech Yortlen Neuron. So that is a phrase that is significant. I shall tell you what it means, but do not be mad if you think it spoils the book. Not my fault. It means wanderer, stand here as witness. So the word Neurun is a verb. Neurun means to stand, to remain, that sort of a thing. And oh, here we go. Here are my pronouns. So I have things like I, which is ta, you, which is kai, he, she, or it, they're all the same pronoun. Ro, we is tai, you is ke, they is ru. So the reason I have he, she, and it all as the same pronoun is because I wanted to deal mostly with context, and also because it makes my life easier. Yeah, anyways. So, okay, here are some phrases that I have. Sak ai kaord, which is a man of blood. Ka being, therefore, a prefix that acts as a preposition. All prepositions in Eloaech are prefixed onto the words that they are modifying. You know, Maknaan, sword song, Riannach, hound killer. So things like that. I have lists all throughout this book of words that I've needed at different points. Because I'm a nerd, I go through and talk about word evolution, which I will get into later. But you just go through, make your list. You can have, you know, however many words you need. If you only need a few, then only do a few. If you need a bunch, do a bunch. But don't worry about how you're combining the words right now. See, I worried about prefixing of prepositions, so all my prepositions are prefixes, so that I did when I was doing the words and my lexicon, but you don't have to worry about that too much right now. Deal with that when we're dealing with syntax, which is putting everything word-wise together. Yep. So go through, make a list of words, have at least, you know, the pronouns and 1 or 2 verbs and a few nouns. And then we can go and talk about how to put them together next week. So I hope that was helpful for you. I'm going to put a link in the description box below for some resources that I've been using to put words together. Put my language together. I hope they're helpful for you. I mean, honestly, at this point, it's really just figuring out what you want to say, what words you need, and what you want them to sound like, which hopefully, if you've done your phonetics as we did last video, then you should have a good idea. And you can just put things together and make it sound fun. Just go through, have fun saying the words, because I really do. Yeah. Otherwise, that's all I've got for you today. It's a shorter video, as I said. Most of the information that we're going to be struggling with grammar-wise is all next week. Oh my goodness, it's going to be fun. Okay, I will see you next time. Bye.